So good afternoon, everyone. Just a note before we begin that this webinar is being recorded. Today is Wednesday, May 20th, and is about 12 o'clock p.m. Welcome to St. Joseph's University's Unlimited Learning Series. Today's webinar is on the role of information security during COVID-19 and beyond with Professor in the College of Arts and Sciences, Dr. Babak Forouraghi, and Monique St. from the class of '94. To our guest speakers and attendees, thank you for being here. I am Andrew Napolitano from the class of 2017, and I have the honor of hosting today's event. First and foremost, we'd like to extend well wishes and warmth to everyone and their loved ones. To all of our frontline workers and essential workers who are keeping us safe and healthy during this uncertain time, we thank you sincerely. To the class of 2020, congratulations on your recent commencement and welcome to the Alumni Network. Thank you to St. Joseph's University for coordinating today's event. A key element of the university's mission is the commitment to lifelong learning. Today, we share the privilege to engage with university experts in an interactive discussion on information security during COVID-19 and beyond as the latest installment of St. Joseph University's Unlimited Learning Series. At this time, I'd like to introduce St. Joseph University's Liz Schlickbrand, who will be assisting behind the scenes with poll questions and the live Q&A session that will take place towards the end of the session. Welcome, Liz.
Thank you so much.
Throughout today's discussion, we encourage attendees to submit questions via the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen. Please include your name, your location, and graduation year if you are an alumnus. And speaking of polls, before we jump into our main content, we welcome attendees to take part in our first poll question that will pop up on your screen. So question number 1. How seriously do you consider the security of your data, both at home and at work? And while we wait for these responses to come in, I'd like to introduce our guests. Thank you to Babak and Monique for offering their insights and expertise to this timely topic. Dr. Babak Forouraghi is a professor in the College of Arts and Sciences, chair of the Computer Science Department, and program director for the Graduate Computer Science programs. Dr. Forouraghi primarily teaches courses on artificial intelligence and machine learning. He is an editorial board member of the Journal of Intelligent Information Management, as well as a reviewer for Journals of Computer-Aided Design and IEEE Transactions on Reliability. He has presented at conferences such as the IEEE Annual Consumer Communications and Networking Conference and Big Data 2018. Ms. Monique St. from the class of '94 has more than 20 years of experience in information technology with extensive depth in areas of infrastructure, enterprise applications, service delivery and optimization, and project management. Ms. St. is the Chief Technology and Security Officer of the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, where she is responsible for enterprise technology and security strategy and implementation. Earlier in her career, she was a consultant for a national technology firm where she provided professional services involving systems administration, engineering, and service management. She obtained ITIL and PMP certifications after graduating from SJU with a degree in sociology as part of the class of 1994. Welcome, Monique and Babak. And before we dive in, let's take a look at the results of this first poll. So again, how seriously do you consider the security of your data, both at home and at work? And with about 2/3 of the vote, we have our second response here. I am generally aware that data security is important and follow guidelines from my employer and internet service providers, with another third indicating that they are keenly aware. It is good. It's a positive sign that everyone at least has some familiarity, and hopefully by the end of this webinar, we will all consider ourselves in that keenly aware bucket in Group A. So cybersecurity has been a topic that we have been exploring for some time recently. The COVID-19 pandemic has been an untimely reminder of the relevance of this topic as we find ourselves going to work, getting an education, and even socializing remotely from our homes. To explore the subject further, let's consult with our experts. To start off this interactive Q&A session, I'd like to start with this question. How have threats evolved to exploit a time of global pandemic? And in what ways are they the same? What are some fundamental practices to protect personal and professional data? Monique, let's start with you.
Sure. Threats are definitely becoming more sophisticated and more urgent. We're seeing the same types of things: malicious code, targeting, software vulnerabilities, password cracking, phishing, but we're seeing an increase in the amount and targeted with a COVID-19 wrapper. So emails sending from the CDC or World Health Organization being sent as an alias. They're not actually from the CDC, but they're getting people's attention and they're wanting people to click and bring that malicious code into your home computer or your work computer. So that's what's really concerning, is that they're making things relevant to today's time. 12 months ago, they were probably targeting something that was going on 12 months ago, but now more people are distracted. They're thinking about their families, healthcare workers are thinking about their patients, and that's what hackers are honing in on. Babak, any comments on that?
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Monique. It seems in the past 2 months or so, the number of fake domains, websites is really increasing. We have thousands of new websites. They claim anything from cures for COVID to vaccines for coronavirus. And they also collect charity, and they collect all kinds of information. They want to collect all kinds of information from users in order to attack their personal computers. So if there are phishing emails, they are out there. So be very careful about links, fake links. Be very careful about fake websites out there disseminating wrong information. A lot of it is malware. Coronavirus.com, you may think is a legit site, but it is all about, at this point, ransomware, phishing attempts. I was reading an article, it was very interesting. The number of ransomware has really increased in the past 3 months. And as Monique mentioned, the target is the established health care system. So we have to be very vigilant about that.
Thank you both. Babak, excuse me, let's stick with you here. From an academic perspective, what themes and concepts are we able to study in greater depth during a time like this?
That's a very good question, Andrew. A lot of different things have been discovered in the past 2 months in terms of what technologies we are using in order to fight cyber threats, in order to detect cyber threats, in order to safeguard our own private information, in addition to the work that we are doing at home remotely. In some ways, we all have become members of our IT departments at home working remotely. So there are many different facets to information security, whether it's regarding your personal computers or whether you're navigating on the web. It is very important for us to realize that when we are visiting the websites on the internet, we have to be very cautious, again, as I said before, about fake websites. There are legitimate websites out there that can check whether a website is legitimate or not. So if you receive an email that has a link and you're suspicious about that, please don't click on that link. Phishing is a very popular attempt to gain control of your computer. Ransomware is a type of malicious software or malware that restricts access to your computer or your mobile device. And they do it in different ways. For example, they can lock up your screen, and you see that infamous message that you cannot use your computer until such time you pay $500 or a certain number of Bitcoins in order to get your computer back. Or they encrypt the contents of your important files and documents. And again, they ask for a ransom in order to release your precious photos, your documents, sensitive data, and so forth. So we have to be very careful about the sites that we visit. We also have to be very careful about the software updates that we must perform in order to make sure our antivirus softwares are updated in a timely fashion. From an academic point of view, one of the things that I think Monique would like to speak to that later on is that We have collected a lot of information at this point, and that is really useful information for us to figure out how these cyber criminals are attacking systems, what are the new ways of dealing with them. Forensics, in fact, is a very popular field. What happens when your site is under attack? What happens when you have been exploited? So we collect information. Vast amount of information can be processed by artificial intelligence and machine learning techniques. In some ways, we cannot stop what is happening at this point, but they're going to be useful research tools in the future to detect future attempts. As Monique said, right now we are in the midst of a pandemic, but the same tools are going to be used again in the future from something that is upcoming. So in some ways, we have been able to identify obsolete technological tools that we have used in the past in order to fine-tune them and better prepare for future attacks. To be realistic, attacks are not going to subside. As we develop more and more sophisticated techniques to detect threats, to fight, they are going to also develop more sophisticated techniques to launch attacks against us. So Monique, would you like to?
I would just comment on the behavior analytics tools are going to be really key to put on our networks to ensure that we can figure out if there's abnormalities between computers or between a server and a computer. Those behavioral analytics and the machine learning to understand what the machines are saying to each other, and if there's abnormalities, raising the red flag so that our teams can react and respond to it, or machine learning will actually respond for us. So some of those are really key, and I'm interested in talking to Babak further about that at a later time.
Excellent answers. Thank you both. What are some of the most notable ways that this pandemic has created new or exacerbated existing cybersecurity concerns for hospitals and healthcare systems? Monique, I'll direct this one to you.
So definitely we've seen increased risk in telehealth and remote workers. CHOP went from 20 telehealth visits a day to 1,700. And then remote workers, a couple hundred to a couple thousand, about 6,000. So we always have to look at the security around that, what the protocols are, and can we increase capacity without compromising security. Monitoring is also key in ensuring consistent, secure services. And just how we respond. So that risk is definitely inherent with targeting healthcare. Our healthcare institutions are focusing on patients, but our information security teams are always focused on CHOP as an enterprise and making sure CHOP is secure. So even though hackers are targeting us, we are really standing firm with a solid perimeter, and we're making sure we're constantly monitoring and reacting to any threats that we're seeing. Anything to add, Babak, on a healthcare note?
I concur with you. What we have seen in the past month or so is a sudden jump in number of video conferencing that is taking place. Different software packages going from millions per week to billions per week. That has really been a tremendous pressure on companies to keep up with the technology, and also in some ways the increased usage has helped us identify some vulnerabilities in some of these video conferencing packages, and in some ways it has been a positive outcome because we are understanding the security vulnerabilities and we are dealing with them. At the same time, it's an added responsibility for each of us when we are using these video conferencing tools to be careful in terms of what it is that we're putting out there. The sensitivity of information is very important. Don't put out anything that has to do with your health, anything that has to do with your medical status, anything that has to do with your financial information. All of that, if you have a question about your work that is sensitive, call your manager. Use a phone call in order to figure out what is going on. Don't trust the system. One thing that is very important to realize for a consumer is that, is my information safe while in transit over the internet? Something called encryption is a very sophisticated mathematical tool that takes plain text. Plain text is the spoken words that you are hearing right now. So if I'm sending that information in a digitized format over the internet, or an image, or an email message, all that information, we call that plain text. That means if there is an eavesdropper that is going to capture a packet in transit, they're going to be able to figure out what is going on. So it's important for us to use services that are encrypted. So encryption means that these strings of zeros and ones are jumbled in such a way that an eavesdropper would not be able to make sense out of it. Encryption is very important when you go to the web in order to visit your financial institution, to transfer money from your savings to checking whatever you see in the URL HTTP. That's a protocol. Make sure that you use a secure version of that HTTPS. That S stands for security. So encryption is a very strong tool for us to use in order to fight this issue, in order to maintain privacy. And obviously there are lots of other issues in terms of software updates and our habits in terms of visiting websites and so forth. As I mentioned to Monique before, this is a recurring theme. It's going to come up a lot. Every sentence I'm going to add it with a final thing. Be careful what websites you visit. Be careful what email messages you open. Attachments, don't trust them. Links, don't trust them. So I'm going to keep repeating that.
And I would also add, Babak, you had mentioned video conferencing and some vulnerabilities. Check in with the vendors, check their website, listen if they have patches to their software and download them. Or check with your companies to see if you're using the latest and greatest, or if there's patches that need to be downloaded to your system. And I agree with Babak. Practice with a questioning attitude. It's something that we always do at CHOP, and it's a CHOP tradition to stop if there's a concern and ask a question to verify that information. And you always want to do that to protect not only you, but your families and even your organizations as you work through this information security vulnerabilities and things.
Absolutely. And you brought up an important point, Monique, in terms of updating software. It's very important for us to stay on top of that. And one bad habit that we all have developed is that when we want to update something, we may have the tendency to Google something. And the first link that appears, we go there and we do the update. Make sure that you update your critical software from the company site. Don't update it from another site that may be malicious. If you have antivirus, which I hope you do, running on your computer protecting you, make sure that the software is updated. If there are patches that are released once a month, go through the trouble, that extra 10 minutes or so, or some rebooting after that, to make sure that your AV software is up to date. These viruses that come to the surface, they carry these unique signatures. And these unique signatures need to be known by your AV software package in order to protect you from malware, from viruses, from phishing attempts, and so on and so forth. So make sure that you update your security AV as well, your internet security package.
Right, so there was one question, sorry to steal it, Andrew, regarding should people delay patches? And the answer is, I think Babak and I agree, don't delay any patches, install them as soon as they're released by your operating system vendor or any vendors. You want to make sure they're basically saying, hey, we have holes in our operating system or our software. We want to protect you. Here's software to install in order to protect you. So you really want to install that pretty immediate and make sure that your systems are protected. One thing that you could do is schedule it on an overnight run so it's not impacting your day-to-day working 9 to 5 type hours.
Absolutely. It is a trade-off, Monique, between convenience and security. And I always say err the side of security. It may take away 10 minutes from your time. It may involve a reboot, but it is a safe practice.
Right. And just a little insight, and then I'll hand it back over to Andrew. We all rebooted our computers before this webinar to make sure any patches were installed that we needed to be installed.
And I can personally say I had to update my Zoom software several times. But Monique, I want to go back to a theme that you brought up a few minutes ago. It's professional skepticism. So as a data professional myself, I'm always wary of the information, the data, the news that I'm consuming. What are some trusted sources of information that you guys are staying up to date with?
Right. So normally I go to threat intelligence sources from industry standards, from our third-party vendors, from CISOs that are national, security officers at national. we all share information, what we're seeing, what indicators of compromise are out there. We're all out there to help each other, not just our organizations. So it's really a very neat network to be able to collaborate. The other thing is the Department of Homeland Security has a website that does information briefings and tips and tricks for everyday users. So we can share that with you guys. There are also local law enforcement agencies that really do reach out to different businesses throughout the Philadelphia area to ask them if they need help or just to be available in case there is an incident.
I agree with Monique, and I would like to add that there are also sites that allow you to figure out the recent threats, such as computer emergency response systems. And a word of caution, if you are receiving emails, let's say about the incoming census, or there is something about the second wave of stimulus checks, make sure you go to .gov websites, government websites. Those are trusted websites. If it doesn't seem like a .gov, don't go there.
That's excellent. Thank you both. So we both consider the two of you experts, but let's simplify this to a fundamental skill, and that's communication. So how have you guys been communicating guidance to people who maybe are not as technically advanced as you? What are some tips that we might be able to take away?
So keeping it simple, less technical is better. How does it impact employees and patients and families, and making sure that we're really hitting home a crisp, clear message. A lot of times we'll take pictures of emails that are threatening and put them in the email so that our clinicians don't even have to think about what they're looking for. If they see it, they just send it to us and alert us, and hopefully feel comfortable reaching out to us. I think that's part of the key. We don't want to inundate people with messaging. We want to make sure that anything that we send out is clear and important. And honestly, today I just sent out two important information emails to all of CHOP to make sure that they were aware of certain things that were going on. And we really needed to make sure, and I say we because I have a whole team behind me, it's not just me. And CHOP has an internal communications department that helps with that to make sure that we are providing that awareness and education to people.
Now, in terms of St. Joe's, we have our IT department who is doing a fantastic job keeping us abreast of recent threats. So on a regular basis, we receive communication from our IT, the kinds of things to be on the lookout for, new phishing attempts and so forth. So if you belong to an organization, I strongly suggest that you follow their regulations in terms of their IT requirements, and you can always contact your manager, your employer, if you have questions about how to use your own computer or to use the company laptop at home. If you are not part of an organization, as Monique mentioned, there are lots of websites where you can go for information. And a lot of it is common sense too, even if you don't belong to an organization and you are a casual user of the internet, you're just using an email or you're just shopping on Amazon, make sure that you are practicing safe, you have safe habits in terms of practicing in terms of websites that you visit, updating your software packages, and yeah, it's a lot of common sense. Remember, cyber criminals out there, they use a lot of social engineering. So you really don't need to be on top of the technical field in order to anticipate or slow down some of the things they do. You just use a lot of common sense. And one more thing I wanted to mention in terms of ransomware, which has been rampant in the past month or two, is that a lot of ransom attempts are requesting bitcoins or money from their victims. So in order to eliminate the possibility of having to pay ransom to collect your own information, back to your information up all the time. I back up my data on a regular basis, offline or on the cloud. That is your own choice. But if you back it up, then you won't be in a position to pay the money, like the sheriff's department that had to pay the ransom or some hospital that had to pay ransom. Remember, anytime you pay ransom, part of that money is used by cyber criminals to develop more sophisticated tools out there. And that is something that we need to bring to stop. We can't stop it, obviously, but we can slow it down.
Excellent. And before this next question, I would like to ask our audience to participate in our second polling question. So you'll see that pop up on your screen in a moment. Okay, so question number 2, which of the following have you done recently, and select all that apply? So as these responses are coming in, I would like to ask the next question here. So do we think that security teams can be as effective remotely compared to working together in person in the office? Monique, let's start with you.
Absolutely. So not speaking for CHOP, but in general, there are a lot of companies that have multi-sites. So there are people remote anyway. Now it makes it a little bit more difficult because people are remote at home. But as long as people and teams have the tools and the systems to be able to monitor and react immediately, there's no reason why they couldn't be in different locations. I would say one of the benefits of COVID-19 and this has been just the uptick in video conferencing and the collaboration between teams and people. You know, I couldn't get somebody on a FaceTime 2 months ago. Now that's all people do is communicate, you know, so it's pretty neat that we have a lot of collaboration and just skills and team members talking video versus just voice. Babak, do you want to comment on remote teams?
I completely agree with you. As you work in your work environment, there is a digital infrastructure that you're taking advantage of. There's an internet that you're connecting to. There's an internal intranet. So what is happening as remote workers, we are still connecting to the same digital infrastructure, but through the internet. So if the right tools are in place, let's say you're using a virtual private network, a VPN. So what a VPN does, it creates this tunnel, and information that is exchanged between your machine and the remote server at work is encrypted, and as such is not going to be a point of, it cannot be exploited by eavesdroppers. So I completely agree. It is one of the benefits, if we can call that benefit of COVID, that we have found out how to behave as IT personnel at our own homes. And in addition, we are becoming more and more aware of dangers, of threats, of cyber criminals and cyber activity out there. So there have been some positive outcomes associated with the COVID. We have been able to identify some obsolete technologies out there in terms of our cybersecurity, in terms of the way we connect to the rest of the world, and also in terms of learning new habits, safer habits, things that we took for granted when we were working within the walls of a company. Now we are rethinking. So that has been a positive outcome of the pandemic.
Excellent. And our results are in. So which of the following have we done recently as an audience? It seems that saving our most important files to our desktop is the most popular risky behavior on this list, followed by failing to update software, which we have talked about, and sharing or writing down or using a simple password. And I'd actually like to focus on this behavior here. I'd like to ask our guests to comment on some of these password generation or password management softwares that we've seen become popular recently. Babak, let's start with you.
Yeah, that's a good question, Andrew. Passwords obviously are very important, and 1, 2, 3, 4 as a password doesn't work anymore. A lot of vulnerabilities that are being exploited at this point is that when a system is in development, the developers use these easy passwords because it's easy to get into the system, do the job, and develop the system. But when the system goes into production, there's always that back end web server or database server that still has that 1, 2, 3, 4 password. So when a malicious piece of software, malware, finds its way in your computer, the first thing it does, it goes into reconnaissance mode. So it may be dormant for a few days. You cannot even see what it's doing. But behind the scenes, what it's doing is trying to find out what are the web servers, database servers that can be accessed using some very simple passwords. Once those vulnerabilities are discovered later on, maybe a few days, a week, 10 days later on, they go into full effect and they start the ransomware, they start whatever damage they want to do. So be very careful in choice of passwords. Now, be very lucky. Nowadays, you don't get by choosing 1, 2, 3, 4. If you go to a website for a bank or financial institution, even if you want to use 1, 2, 3, 4, they won't allow you to do that, and that is fine. The next question is, okay, I have 20 passwords. I have 40 passwords. How do I maintain them? Should I have all of them the same thing? Bad idea. Don't pick the same password for all your major accounts, because if there is a vulnerability and one is compromised, everything is compromised. That is an old trick that cyber criminals are very well aware of, that people tend to be lazy. They don't want to change their passwords. They pick simple passwords and they use same password for multiple accounts. So how do you manage that? There are different practices. There are, as you mentioned, password managers that keep all your passwords. So they put it in a vault. And again, the same old tool, and encryption takes place here, but in a different way. So to make it simple, they put all your passwords. Let's say you have a password for your Gmail, a password for your Amazon, a password for Yahoo, whatever. You put all of them in a file, and that file is encrypted using a key. The strength of an encrypting algorithm or an encryption process is with the key. So nowadays we have a very popular algorithm that is very strong, advanced encryption standard, AES, uses really good, strong keys. So they use a good, strong encryption algorithm to encrypt your passwords, and they save it in the cloud. Your job as a consumer is to come up with a master password. That master password is not the password to open up the vault, but what happens is that when you go to the cloud to retrieve your vault, you hand over your master password, and there's some complicated hashing function that takes place, but that allows you to retrieve your vault, and in the vault is your password, all your passwords, and you use your own key, passkey to open it up. So that's one way of doing it. Again, relies on you using the cloud. There are different types of services available. Some are free, some of them are paid services. If you want to use password managers on the cloud, be careful. If they're completely free or that you are suspicious about that, they could be malicious packages out there. So be very wary about them. And also the ones that are free, they do not offer as much functionality as the ones that are paid. So that you need to use your own judgment. I personally keep my password offline next to me, physically next to me. And all my passwords are strong and they're all encrypted using my own AES key. It is my personal choice not to use a password manager, but I cannot speak for the entire population. You need to use your own good judgment, but one way or another, encryption of your password, whether they're kept offline, physically next to you, or in the cloud, that is really crucial.
Yeah, I would agree. And just take into consideration the tool selection if you do decide to download a password keeper. I personally don't use one, but if you were to, just please research it, make sure it's secure, and make sure your password is not necessarily ultra complex, but something that you're going to remember and something that you're not going to have to write down or tape to your monitor or put on your desktop. Those are the things that people look for when they spray for not complex passwords on your computer or when you're putting in information. So please just be aware, and again, ask with a questioning attitude. Is it safe? Is it secure? And just keep asking before you download something and use it, like Babak had mentioned.
And I would like to add, Monique, that when the opportunity arises, use multi-factor authentication, because of the fact that even if the password is compromised, they're not going to have your cell phone. So that is also a very good, solid way to have added layer of security, an extra layer of security to your communication.
Right. So multi-factor is using 2 factors to identify you. So a lot of banks use your username and password, and then they'll say, okay, let me text you. And they'll text you this to have that layer, that additional layer. So that's when Babak talks about multi-factor. That's the added layer of security that most companies have in place these days, and especially financial institutions and healthcare institutions. But definitely look for that as you're signing up for services, as you're downloading applications. Are they asking for 2 factors to identify yourself? Because if they're not, and your password gets hacked, it's easy enough to put in your username and password and get into your accounts.
And as I promised before, Monique, I'm going to sound like a broken record. Back up your data, and I'm going to say it one more time, back up your data all the time. I do that with a passion all the time, and I keep my data offline, an external drive or a USB away from my computer. So these are the things we can do to safeguard our digital assets, to protect ourselves from the possible virus or ransomware that may land in our computer. Mathematically, it's always possible for that to happen, but we can take measures in order to better deal with the outcome of it.
Right, and if I could just speak from a corporate perspective and an institution and organization, please don't put anything externally, put it in the network shares and the network directories that your company provides you, because they are backed up and all the security protocols are in place for that information. So that's something that we ask at CHOP, that things that are really essential are backed up on our network to make sure that we are not only backing them up, but we have the antivirus in place and the encryption in place to secure those files.
Okay, excellent. Thank you both for those answers. At this time, we're running a little bit heavy on time. I'd like to open up the questions to some of the Q&A that have been submitted from the audience. Liz?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is coming from one of the pre-submitted questions. What cybersecurity trends keep you up at night?
So I can probably answer that. I would say all of the above. The last 40 minutes that we've talked about keep me up at night. The malicious code, the sophistication in what we're seeing. But I think the one thing that really keeps me up at night is that person that could click on that link and bring new malicious code into an organization and really impact their operations. And that goes to practice with a questioning attitude and everything that we do around education and awareness to users and employees to make sure that they know if they see a link or an attachment that they're not sure about, to ask a question, raise their hand and verify it, and look at information security as partners versus, somebody that they don't want to go to for help. We want to make sure that we are a help center to them and really be available to them. So that's what keeps me up at night, and we try to put tons of mitigating controls in place in order to help me sleep. So Babak, any other things that keep you up at night?
I completely agree with you. And from a technical standpoint, what really bothers me a lot, what keeps me up at night is the knowledge that as we are developing more and more sophisticated tools to combat these very sophisticated pieces of software, our cyber criminals are becoming more sophisticated as well. So it's a never-ending cycle. So you can put a lot of money into research and development and implement new tools to detect what happens and how to project into the future, what's going to happen next month, what's going to happen 12 months from now. But the thing is that the same sophisticated tools that we use, whether it's artificial intelligence, behavior analysis, machine learning, the same tools are used by cyber criminals to launch new attacks. So what worries me a lot is this never-ending cycle, which I don't think there's any end to that at this point. Maybe I'm being pessimistic, but Monique can speak to that. But it seems that in view of the fact that they're becoming more and more sophisticated and complex, they can find these kits in the dark web. Somebody from Ukraine or Russia or some other place, they can find these really inexpensive kits for $100. And they can launch attacks against huge financial institutions and collect lots of data and sell them cheaply and collect a lot of money. So, and with minimal coding skills. So that is something that is worrisome to me as an educator. So it's a never-ending cycle, unfortunately.
Agreed.
All right.
So
So
what else from the audience?
absolutely. Another theme that's been coming through is about personal home security. So questions about, should I get a VPN at home? Do I need another security layer for my router? Perhaps we could speak to that.
Definitely routers and Wi-Fi at home need to have a password and make sure it's encrypted. So along with that, just having your computer updated. If you don't have a VPN through work and you constantly are connecting to business, you may want to investigate the need for one and if you should be downloading one and using it. You know, if there's a consistent practice of direct connect to a local business or, you know, a peer network, you definitely want to protect the transmission from your computer to theirs. So the router itself isn't going to do that. We at CHOP make sure that there's a layer of defense with multiple technologies. So just one isn't necessarily going to stop something, but if you have a layer of it, you know, 5 to 7 different technologies, whether it's antivirus, a difficult password, patching your systems, they all help to protect. So it's not just VPN or patching, it may be a combination of things that will help you protect your home network. And it depends on your use case and what your requirements are. So I would say further investigations probably needed, but hopefully that helps you in terms of what some of the components to look for are. Babak, any comments regarding what else to look for?
Absolutely. Everything that you mentioned, everything that we have mentioned so far, it's valid in terms of home security. Make sure that, again, your software is updated, your browser is updated. Your router, as Monique mentioned, is extremely important. Sometimes router software becomes old, and that's something that we may not be cognizant of. Make sure that the firmware, the software in your router is up to date, because there are also patches for routers. Your wireless leaves you vulnerable in some ways because of the fact that it's somebody, if you live in the bottom of the cul-de-sac and somebody drives by, they may be able to gain access to your network if it's not encrypted, and if it's not encrypted with the correct key. Not all encryptions are equal, so make sure that when you talk to your ISP, internet service providers, you understand what are the options you have for encryption, and always pick the strongest one. It may be the slowest one, but gives you that peace of mind that you're connecting to your environment in a secure fashion. Again, all the other practices in terms of updating your AV software, making sure that it is patched on a regular basis, is very important. But router is extremely important. It's a portal to the rest of the world, so make sure that your router is carrying correct information, is updated on a regular basis.
Great. Liz, we have time for a few more.
Sure. So this one is in regards to online learning. So thinking about using these virtual platforms, and how concerned should we be with those getting hacked?
So I would say, not talking about a specific technology, I would be concerned about any application out there and making sure that whenever I use it, that it is secure, that there's a username and password, that people are verifying their identities. And I know that has been in the news a lot lately. So it's again, practices with a questioning attitude. And if something doesn't seem right, don't use it. Make sure that you're not using confidential information or talking about confidential information while you're using it. So I think, you know, we go back to what keeps me up at night. I would be concerned about everything, and I would look before I used it to make sure that it was secure, it was using the right credentials, and making sure that just overall that it's something that was safe for me and my information. And, you know, CHOP's a whole nother story, because we have assessments and risk mitigations and evaluations constantly going on to make sure that what we put in place is appropriate for what CHOP needs as a business. So, personally, definitely be concerned and look at the information that you're receiving in the news and read the information on the vendors' websites about their vulnerabilities and what they're doing for you as a consumer to protect you and your data and the transmission of the information. Babak?
And I would like to complement what Monique talked about. She concentrated on the business side, and in terms of academic side of it, and what we teach in our classes in cybersecurity in terms of security practices and so forth. We do intend to study vulnerabilities of software systems. So we have these virtual machines. So it is virtual in the way that it's sandboxed. The hardware system, the software system that we're working with, it's not connected to the rest of the world. So our students are able to study concepts in cybersecurity within those sandboxed environments, so they can see what threats exist, how, for example, SQL injection attempts taking place, what's buffer flow attacks. So in the safe environments, you can study these concepts without, compromising your system, your computer system.
Mm-hmm.
Great. I think we have time for 1 to 2 more.
Sure. So Babak had spoken earlier about an increase in ransomware. What types are you seeing increasing?
In general, ransomware, Liz, it's a type of software, it's malicious software, obviously malware, that is designed to restrict users' access to a computer or a device. And typically what happens when that piece of software takes control of your machine, it behaves either by locking the resources that you have access, for example, locks up the screen. So you see this message that your computer cannot be used unless you send certain number of Bitcoins, anywhere from 500, I don't know, to like 2,000, 3,000 to some location. Or another thing that it can do, so the first kind is called a locker ransomware. The other kind is crypto. So what it does is that encrypts the contents of your documents, and they have an idea where important documents are saved for a certain operating system. So they target that location and they encrypt the files using a key that is known only to the cyber criminal. And again, they ask for money and they release the key to you after ransom has been paid. So these are monetizing attempts made by cyber criminals out there. Crypto and locker ransomware.
Right. I'll just add that, there's new strains being developed all the time. So just stay informed about new indicators and new threats. Over the past couple of months, there's been something called Maze ransomware, which encrypts data and then steals it. So that is a big concern for organizations. Not only do they encrypt it and it makes it unusable, so you can't get to your files, but they also steal the data. So just imagine the impact that would have. The other one that just came up within the week was something called ProLock ransomware, where they encrypt your data and then they threaten to post it on social media. So all of these different variants are just going to be becoming increasingly more visible throughout the industry and globally.
So one of the things that comes up, right, is the idea behind privacy. Try to decrease your digital footprint out there to protect yourself. And again, I'm saying again, back up your data. So if in case it is locked up, in case it is encrypted, you don't have to pay for it.
Right.
Absolutely. Liz, do we have one more?
Yeah. How about, what would you recommend to students who are looking to get into this industry?
So first and foremost, I would recommend, if you have a passion for security, to find opportunities. I think now is a little bit harder because everybody's remote and social distancing, but you can join local meetups online. I just joined one a couple of weeks ago, Women in Cybersecurity. You can participate in webinars like this one. LinkedIn has tons of information, a wealth of information and webinars, and just talk to people in the industry. You could find people anywhere. LinkedIn is my favorite because you can find a wealth of information and contacts through LinkedIn, but I would say that most leaders are willing to share their knowledge and pay it forward that way. I also know that St. Joe's has some classes and degrees in information security if students are interested, that I'm sure Babak can talk about as well.
I agree, Monique. If the passion is there, if you're really interested in this field, which is a viable field, there is really an increasing demand for information security analysts out there because of the fact that the threats are increasing. So if you have a passion for that, there are a lot of online resources available, so you can pursue those on a personal basis. Or if you want to make it a little bit more official, you can come to St. Joe's. We have the concentration for undergraduates. We also have concentration for graduates. I had an advisee, his name Evan. He had this really huge passion for cybersecurity. So he went for the internship in the Department of Homeland Security, and what a valuable experience it was for him. He really got to work with professionals out there. He really got to see what are the latest trends in technology and the way that this warfare is carried out by the government. So there are lots of ways for you to stay abreast of the field, getting internship. We had a student who came to us from Temple. His undergraduate degree was in geology with a passion in cyber. He received his master's in cyber. Right now he's working as a cyber security specialist in a company. So if the passion is there, the tools are there, follow your dreams. It is a very viable field.
Wonderful. Okay, so as we prepare to conclude today's webinar, I am going to ask both Babak and Monique to share any final thoughts. But before we do that, we are going to ask our attendees to participate in the final poll. Okay, so question number 3. Participating in this webinar has, so the bookend to our first question. While these results come in, I'd like to thank both Babak and Monique again for lending their time and expertise to today's conversation. Thank you to St. Joseph's University for coordinating this and hosting this event. Thank you to Liz and Maria and their team for guiding us during our preparation, and the IT folks who made this happen behind the scenes. Lastly, thank you, the audience, for your attention and participation. Liz, do we have some results? Okay, so participating in this webinar has most popular response, highlighted some actions I need to take to further protect data and personal information, and secondly, reinforce that I am taking all the right steps to secure data and personal information. So it's excellent news that we've made an impact here, and it's even better news that a quarter of you already have strong habits and practices on your own. So wonderful. So like I mentioned before, we're going to ask for some closing thoughts. Monique, let's start with you.
Sure. So just a couple closing thoughts. One is something that you heard from Babak and I throughout this entire 40 minutes, 45 minutes, is to continue to practice with a questioning attitude when it comes to information security. It's really important to verify information, verify the sender, and look at your information security department as a partner in this, and reach out to them if you have any questions or need assistance. The other thing that I would mention is, from an organizational standpoint, make sure that you're collaborating with other organizations and vendor partners, because they bring a wealth of information and services and can really contribute to your information security posture. So I just want to thank St. Joe's for the opportunity as well.
And I would like to add, Monique, that I completely agree with you. In terms of safeguarding your personal information, it's the same old story at the end of the day. You really have to be aware of what is it that you're keeping on your computer, whether you're backing up your data, whether you're updating your software, where is it that you go to update your software, what are the websites that you're visiting. Whenever in question, there are lots of available resources on the net that can help you. What are the vicious websites that I should avoid? And exercise caution, as Monique mentioned, zero trust model. If something comes and you're suspicious about that, don't take action. Call somebody that can help you with that. So it is a lot of social engineering that goes into that. Remember that we may go past this pandemic in a few months, but there will be other situations ahead. So we have to be prepared in terms of how do we connect with the world outside. These practices that Monique and I have been preaching for the past hour are sustainable because they allow us to go to a very unsecure world. And these attacks are going to become more sophisticated, but it is our responsibility to keep good habits. And in ending, again, I would like to thank all SJU team for making this available for all of you. Thank you all for participating, and I wish you a very healthy summer for you and your families. Hopefully we will put this behind us very soon. Take care.
Thank you, and we hope you'll join us for the next installment of the Unlimited Learning series on the economic impact of coronavirus, scheduled for Thursday, June 11th. Check out sju.edu/unlimitedlearning for the recording of this webinar and for the latest updates and upcoming events. Again, I'm Andrew Napolitano, class of 2017, and we look forward to next time. Thank you and stay well.